What's up, champs? Welcome to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Short Shifts Fantasy Hockey Podcast. I am your host, Ben Burnett. Joining me tonight, once again, my pal and yours, the talented Mr. E, Louis Ezekiel. Louis, my friend, how are you doing on this fine Thursday evening?
Doing good. Breathing a sigh of relief. I got through parent-teacher conferences yesterday, or parent-student-teacher conferences. So voice is maybe a little rough, but I think I rested it pretty good today, and I'm ready to roll. We got some real games to talk about here.
Well, let me ask you this question, Louis, on the topic of parent-teacher meetings. You have a couple of fantasy teams, I know, this season. We're very early on in the season, but whose parents would you be wanting to talk to try and stimulate a better performance? Who are you already upset with if they were one of your classmates?
Well, I think I might have to call up Mr. and Mrs. Matthews because I've noticed that their son has always been, very involved, always volunteering, lots of participation. And it just seems like ever since we got back for the new season, he's been a little more withdrawn. I think he's putting in some effort there. I saw some shots the other night, but just, the production is not there. Like his, when it comes to test time, all that practice, all of those attempts, it's not really going through. So, Mr. and Mrs. Matthews might be getting a call from me pretty soon.
Wow. This is why they pay us to come on a podcast twice a week and talk about fantasy hockey, because we bring in the inciting analysis from the world of teaching. Louis, let's get into the show. Of course, we are hosting the Short Shifts podcast, twice weekly catch up on all the news in between the major weekly episodes of Keeping Karlsson, the ginormous Sunday night Mother Show. But Louis, let's start with an injury to a player who I know is a predominant member of one of the Keeping Karlsson hosts teams. Patrik Laine left the season opener Wednesday night, halfway through the first, with an elbow injury. He's now out for 3 to 4 weeks, which is a pretty big bummer for a player who put up a goal and 2 shots in just 7 minutes of ice time last night. Once Laine did go down, the Jackets kind of just hit the line blender most of the rest of the game, but they did have practice today, and it looks like Justin Danforth is the player who could be the benefactor here. He did join the top power play unit on 2-man advantages last night after Laine left, and then he also skated in Laine's spot on the other side of Johnny Gaudreau and Boone Jenner in practice today. Looking back to last year, which was Danforth's first, he was a rookie, put up 10 goals and 4 assists in 45 games last year, shot about a shot and a half per game, but he was also only playing 14 minutes. So in theory, last night he played 16 and a half minutes, if you're counting on a few extra minutes a night. Presumably, maybe we could be talking about a guy who's going to shoot to get 2 shots a night while he skates on line 1. But doesn't have a track record of success, I guess is what I'm saying. Is this an interesting waiver wire option for you, or do you think of this news as mainly just a bummer of a downgrade for the rest of the Jackets fantasy options?
Yeah, I hate to say it, but I think I got to go with the latter option here. He just doesn't seem like a super interesting option for me. Like, this is not a situation where I think you just say, well, the next best thing is going to be plugging in the guy who's replacing my injured player. I think there are guys that we're going to talk about later on in the show that I'd be much more interested in picking up than just trying to do like a 1-for-1 replace my Laine with Justin Danforth. I mean, he could be worth a stab. If he really is getting this power play 1 and line 1 treatment, he's going to find his way into a point here and there, it seems like. But yeah, I don't see that as being like an especially attractive option when I think there's better guys on the wire.
I could see that. Justin Danforth doesn't excite me. That's for sure.
One guy that I think you could look at as a potential replacement, I know he's kind of a little-known guy. He played over in Europe last season. We haven't heard a lot from him, but he's really made an impact with his entrance into the NHL. You might have heard of this guy, David Krejci. I know that John really has embraced him. I think his team name is Krejci like a fox, which is outstanding. I'm obviously joking around here, but Krejci has come back to the Bruins and really just had an outstanding return. He and David Pastrnak just looked really, really, really great in that first game. Krejci had a goal and 2 assists, including a power play point in almost 18 minutes in his return. Really seems like a great option out there. Only rostered in 18% of Yahoo leagues. I would be way more interested in picking up Krejci than Justin Danforth, certainly, especially if the Bruins are going to play with the type of fire under them that we got to see last night.
Yes, it was a bit closer than I think the final score. There was a empty net goal. But yeah, definitely a great showing for that second line that ended last season so hot between Krejci and, I guess it was the Hall Pastrnak connection that looked good. And it's definitely they haven't lost a step replacing who was it there last year? Was it Charlie Coyle it was one of those unexciting Bruins. Yeah, so I mean, it's really nice to see Krejci start so hot, and I'm definitely interested after a 3-point season opener. Speaking of players, Lewis, that I'm much more excited about than I was about a month ago when we were doing preseason shows. That's Andrei Kuzmenko, a player that I kind of poo-pooed when I was on the show with Dave Betton of the Stream Scheme. Shouts out cousin Dave. Now 39% rostered. And what we saw last night is he is playing with Pettersson and Höglander, just like we expected, on what feels to me like kind of one of 3 top lines that Bruce Boudreau is running. It's a bit of a 1A, 1B, 1C situation over in Vancouver. But also, when Brock Besser went down, it looked like, okay, this is a cool opportunity for Kuzmenko to sort of maybe put up some extra points at the start of the season. But obviously, Brock Besser is Brock Besser, was on pace for 40 goals as a rookie, that type of a player that we just sort of see as one of the staples in Vancouver. And Brock Besser was back for the season opener, and he did not take back his spot on the top power play. Andrei Kuzmenko has supplanted him, put up a power play goal, 4 shots last night in 18 minutes of action. If that's the case, if we're looking at a power play 1 Kuzmenko, I am going to have to walk back my preseason hesitation all the way back to the start, because that's a must add, I would say. I would prefer him to Krejci, and I would definitely prefer him to Justin Danforth. What do you think about that, Lewis?
Yeah, so what stands out to me is the shots and the minutes. When you're dealing with a 1A, 1B, 1C situation, as I think you described it well, you want somebody who is, getting reasonable minutes, like above, 17, I think is where you want to aim. And that power play 1 opportunity, I think, is going to make sure, as long as he holds it, that he's going to be out there, getting some really productive minutes. I love that he took 4 shots. I think that is really exciting. I am not surprised at all that of most of the people, at least the people we're going to be talking about in the first half of the show, he is the most rostered. A cool opportunity for him. I know there was some buzz for him at the start of the season, and not everybody shared it, myself included. I was leaning your way, just because I don't love the idea of what that, top 9 kind of looks like. But, that when you have that type of situation, I think having the top power play guys is going to help ensure that you're going to get the best opportunities, and you're not going to have players who are on lines that are not going to see as many minutes or as much success. Kuzmenko put me down as definitely very interested. I don't know that I necessarily like him more than Krejci, just because I do think that the Bruins are kind of going to be leaning on him, because they have the opportunity to play him instead of a Charlie Coyle type. So I feel very confident that Krejci will maintain his position, even if his position isn't necessarily as high flying as Kuzmenko's. But Kuzmenko, obviously with winger eligibility, and on a pretty nice top unit. So I like that for him while he's there. I like them about equally, but we're splitting hairs here. That's not a major concern.
I agree. Yeah. I could see, I wouldn't fight you over Krejci, over that take.
Good. I appreciate that, because I don't want to fight you either, bud.
Well, we are going to fight, though. There's going to be something.
All right, let's head over to Seattle, who, unfortunately for them, gave up quite the comeback to the Ducks. But there was another surprise there besides how Anaheim was able to come all the way back, and that was seeing Justin Schultz play 71% of Seattle's available power play minutes, a whopping 5 minutes and 34 seconds overall. He notched 2 power play assists in that time. He also managed 2 shots and a block and about 20 total minutes of ice time. And he was out there with Beniers and Bjorkstrand, and the other 2 slots kind of flipped around. Sometimes it was McCann and Burakovsky. Sometimes it was Donato and Wenberg. A lot of us were looking at Vince Dunn as the likely power play 1 quarterback, and he did manage a power play assist of his own, but in far fewer minutes. And if Seattle does keep things the way that they are right now, with Schultz only 3% owned on Yahoo, this is a potential power play 1 QB that's available in an awful lot of leagues. I definitely think it's worth a shot. He could be kind of like Kalen Addison, who's had a lot of excitement about him as potentially being, Minnesota's power play 1 guy. Certainly, Schultz is not known for his offense the way that Addison supposedly is, but, that's a nice opportunity. He's got some really skilled players out there. We thought it was going to be more of a 50-50 split, but, it definitely seemed tilted in favor of the Schultz, Beniers, Bjorkstrand power play 1. So I love to pull a lottery ticket like that to grab a guy early on in the season and just sort of see where it goes. Because that's if he ends up holding on to that spot, that's a guy that you could be picking up for nothing at the start of the year, and he could be in your lineup all season long potentially.
Yeah, he reminds me of sort of like a Shane Ghost Despair type of bet, like Ghost was last year, where it's like, you're not picking up a power play 1 guy on a team that's going to light the world on fire, but like if he holds that position, then it could be really interesting because, Matty Beniers, 11 points in 11 NHL games now. Bjorkstrand looked great last night. And Lewis, I don't want to freak you out too bad, but and I definitely don't want to step on Cousin Dave's toes. But Seattle may just have the league's first Streamagami next week, so definitely a good time to have some valuable players off of Les Kraken. So I'm on board for that. I would rather have him than Kalen Addison right now. Addison currently playing his first game of the season, pointless through the first period, but hey. Slow start for Addison, but that's enough for me to just say, hey, I'd take the shot on Justin Schultz, and I would be just fine dropping Vince Dunn pretty much. If they didn't have the great schedule next week, but like in any league that's not deep, I'm probably dropping Vince Dunn. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think I could see holding him through next week, depending on how many defensemen you have and if that's going to be a benefit to your overall schedule. But yeah, if we see another game or 2 like this, I wouldn't have any problem dropping him down to the waiver wire. And then, of course, you'll keep an eye on him and we'll update you if things start to change. And I like what you said about preferring Schultz to Addison. Schultz obviously has been in the league for a while. A veteran guy. He's probably going to end up playing, 5 extra minutes of ice a night. So that's going to give him more opportunities to get those peripherals for you. I think I could definitely see preferring Schultz to Addison potentially, with the caveat that we haven't seen him play a full game yet. So, who knows what he looks like on that power play. But I could definitely see, if you're trying to make a drop. But I feel like there's so many injuries out there. Like lots of teams are just filling in a slot for somebody who, went down, a Jake DeBrusk, a Patrick Laine. So,
two very similarly rostered players right there.
Well, I'm
sorry, just teasing.
In my narcissistic way, I'm thinking about players that are injured in my particular matchup. So,
of course, I should have
top of mind.
Guessed, yeah. Lewis, we have to talk about a couple players who popped 2 power play goals in their season opener. But first, we're going to take a very quick break. You're listening to Short Shifts. Welcome back to Short Shifts. I am joined, of course, by my best pal and co-host, Louis Ezekiel. Louis, we are going to Colorado next, where we have to talk about a couple of players who are looking like they should be on pretty much every single fantasy roster right now. That's Valeri Nichushkin and Arturi Lehkonen. Nichushkin, 77% rostered on Yahoo. Lehkonen, 59%. And both Lehkonen and Nichushkin scored 2 power play goals apiece in the season opening blowout of the Chicago Blackhawks. 3 points for Lehkonen, all on the power play. He put up 3 shots and 19 minutes of ice time on that top line with Nathan MacKinnon and Mikko Rantanen, as well as that power play 1 deployment. And for Nichushkin, it was 2 power play goals, 5 shots, and 20 minutes of ice time, in addition to being on the top unit, also on a new look line 2 with Alex Newhook and Evan Rodriguez. Erod, as I think I made that one up, is as I recall. Canonically. So at some point, obviously, Gabriel Landeskog is going to come back, and presumably one of these two will lose a power play spot. Looking back on my draft, I did draft Nichushkin fairly early, like round 10 maybe in Cupful, because he'd already been good last year, and it seemed like he was in line for a deployment bump. Lehkonen went much, much later. And at this point, as I said earlier, I think they're both must rostered. But I'm curious who you prefer here, because I do kind of feel like I could go either way already. I mean, I think Nichushkin has the safer floor just based on being reliable in fantasy last year. But if Lehkonen is going to get line 1, power play 1 for any stretch of time past the Gabriel Landeskog return, I would prefer to have him.
Yeah, I think you've got the right idea here, and it really sort of, I guess, depends on what you're looking for as you're picking these guys up, if they are in fact available in your league. I really like Lehkonen's spot, obviously, on that top line, but we also know that time on the top is probably pretty limited because we're going to get Landeskog back eventually. So if you're looking more short term, if this is like an injury replacement, I think you go Lehkonen. I think there is a more conservative move to go with Nichushkin, just because even if he's not getting that top exposure with Rantanen and MacKinnon, he'll still be up there on the top power play and is more likely to maintain that spot. I'm also sort of low-key into Alex Newhook. I kind of like him in that, I don't think he's going to go off at the crazy rate that we saw from Kadri, especially because he's not going to have that top power play deployment. But that's a guy that I am keeping an eye on, because I do think that Nichushkin and Rodriguez are pretty good as far as second line mates go. And if teams are putting their best defensive lines out there against MacKinnon, Rantanen, Lehkonen, that might leave some options for the Newhook, Rodriguez, Nichushkin line. So yeah, I think the conservative move is go with Nichushkin because he's probably more likely to hold it. The short term, high reward move might be to go with Lehkonen.
Yeah. And I think the main thing is just don't leave either of them on your waiver wire unless you are the dominant team in a shallower league, in which case I'm sure there are some difficult decisions to be made there.
You figure those guys got to be held across the cupful, right? I doubt there's any league. Anybody who's listening who's playing cupful, I doubt you're going to be able to go to your waiver wire and grab them. But if you're
definitely not Nichushkin, but I wouldn't be shocked if there was 1 or 2 cupful divisions where Lehkonen was not. Yeah, if maybe he gets dropped after the draft and nobody rushed to grab him or something. Maybe.
Yeah. All right. I want to talk about a guy who participated in a big way in that major comeback we talked about as Anaheim took down Seattle in overtime. And one of the big fantasy beneficiaries was Ryan Strome. We sort of had spent some time wondering in the offseason, was this guy just an artifact of his superstar line mate? But he really had an outstanding debut for the Ducks. He scored a power play goal, got 2 assists at even strength, and was on the ice for all 4 regulation goals before Troy Terry finished things in overtime off a sweet setup. I love when a goalie makes a stretch pass. John Gibson just nailed that pass to Terry to put the game away. That was really fun to watch. At any rate, one thing that I really liked was that Strome's lines with Terry and then either McTavish or Vetrano were the only Anaheim lines that weren't caved in on shot attempts for the Ducks. So it was nice to see, him when he was out on the ice, he was having a positive impact on the offense along with his line mates. Zegras is the center to own for Anaheim, certainly, but if you missed out on him, Strome does look pretty appealing. And if he can help Troy Terry kind of recreate his early season success last year, I mean, he was just blowing the doors off of everybody really exciting start, like the own of the start of last season. And if McTavish can continue to kind of display his skills, that's a good player to have on up there too. And you get that favorable Anaheim off night scheduling. So it kind of makes up for his center only eligibility. I've got him in a league where I have 4 other center only players, but I feel like I'll still be able to play him pretty frequently because he has that off night eligibility. So definitely a guy I would be taking a look at. Only 16% owned across Yahoo. I would potentially look at him, you know, in the same, you know, tier as I might, maybe a little bit lower than Krejci and Kuzmenko. But definitely a really interesting option if those guys have already been gobbled up in your league.
Yeah, I would put him a tier above that group as well. Not a guy who I trust to be good all season. I feel like if like we talked about a couple players after the Prague series, Nino Niederreiter as an example, where it's like, yeah, really good start to the season. Not a guy who I'm expecting to, and obviously Strome has better deployment, better opportunity, but just in general, I feel like I'm not going to go wild off one game for Ryan Strome, and that's why I agree with you on keeping him beneath the guys who we're talking about as people who you should be looking at in deep leagues. They should be rostered. In shallower leagues, then that's when you're starting to make decisions of if they're better than your lowest ranked players.
Yeah, I was talking to another manager in Cookupful Tier 1. I won't say who it was to blow up their spot, but we were, talking about some possible trade ideas. And, we remarked, Strome might be one of those players. This was called the Brian Com paradox or something. Like he will often be good enough to be above replacement and will hang out on your roster, and you'll probably hang on to him when he's below replacement level for a while, but then you might miss out on somebody that you wish that you had. So, I think he's like right there as someone who might deserve to be on your roster. And I think the schedule kind of pushes him over the edge as somebody that you're going to be able to get in on a lot of those off nights.
I do think that in your position, you have too many centers regardless, and you should probably trade one anyway and hope that that Strome value off the waiver wire gives you a little bit of a marginal gain, and you can apply your wealth of your value wealth elsewhere.
We'll see. I'll keep you updated on the situation, certainly.
Let's jump over to Carolina next, where I want to talk about my boy Marty Necas. Just 12% rostered on Yahoo. Put up 3 points, a goal and 2 assists, playing 18 minutes on line 2 with Svechnikov and Jesperi Kotkaniemi on a second power play unit that included Andrei Svechnikov, not on the top unit last night. Kotkaniemi there as well, and joined by Stasny and Brett Pesce on that second power play unit. I kind of like Marty Necas as a flyer in deep leagues right now. Like, obviously a guy who is post-hype, which is kind of a position that I like to make some gambles on. And so that might be what appeals to me here. But also wondering what you think about the fact that Andrei Svechnikov is not on the top power play unit. Instead, it looks like the Canes prefer to have Andre Kasha taking a spot next to Sebastian Aho, Teuvo Teravainen, and Seth Jarvis. So putting a lot at you here. We've got Necas putting up big numbers in the first game of the season. We've got Svechnikov on line 2, and we have a power play 1, Andre Kasha. Lewis, what do you make of these 3 guys?
Yeah. So I really think, Necas makes for an interesting potential ad. There's a lot of guys in here that I would put right around him. I love Kasha as a, top PP guy just because I want the best for him, and I feel bad because he is a guy who's been derailed by these injuries, and especially these head injuries. I like that idea. Svechnikov, it just like, how many seasons, I guess, are we going to be bit by this? It's almost like getting to Nikolai Ehlers levels here. And eventually, I'm sure he's going to be a top power play guy for him. But it's like, when, dude? When is this going to happen?
Well, he was last year.
Right. But, I guess not consistently though, right? Like people were complaining that, he's getting moved down, moved around, moved away from some of the other, valuable pieces there. He just seems like a guy that the coaches value as somebody who can be kind of a Swiss Army knife and can fulfill multiple roles. And that's great for a real life hockey team. And it's not so nice for being a fantasy owner. I'm not into Stastny. I understand that he has got some, potentially nice deployment here, but he just is kind of a boring guy to me. So, I think that, yes, he got some, as you said, he got some good run with these units, but I have a hard time seeing him as being particularly interesting. If he proves me wrong, great. So maybe someone to put on a watch list, but stay the course with Svechnikov. He's very skilled. He's going to get you peripherals too. So I think he'll be okay. And then just hope that eventually we see, I hate to do this, but it seems very possible that there could be, a space open up, for injury potentially some point down the road. He'll get his chances up on that top PP.
Yeah, I would be real. I think the issue with Svechnikov is less that he never gets top deployment and more that Rod Brindamore is obsessed with. Somebody bought Rod Brindamore the greatest blender in the world for Christmas last year, and he's very committed to maintaining his blendering habits because he loves to mess around in game, between games. The man is he's a blender-holic.
Yeah, and if you've got it, you got to use it, You
got to use it. And Svechnikov, I think, is one of those players who, interestingly enough, I think, is somebody who usually I would expect to be drafted way above where he should go based on hype possibility. But instead he tends to go kind of where we expect him, at a reasonable level. And so there's always a little bit of, I drafted him last year for the same reason. You draft him for where he's what his value is, maybe a little bump up, because you're hoping for that home run swing. And I'm not, even if it doesn't happen this year, I'm not giving up on Svechnikov kind of taking another step and becoming a superstar.
Yeah, I really think he's like the Carolina Ehlers, not necessarily in style of play, but just in sort of it's his deployment has sort of been halting in terms of where he's getting it, and it's been a little inconsistent. And I agree with you, he's being drafted somewhere right between kind of his ceiling potential, but also that uncertainty about where he's going to be used.
Sham says in the chat he drafted him 29th overall. I would say that's a little high. Yeah, that to me, I saw him going in the lower 30s this year in a lot of drafts, and I thought that was a pretty reasonable spot. 29, you're definitely you're paying a bit of a premium to get in on the potential home run swing, and hey, that could pay off. We are one game in. I'm definitely not counting Svechnikov taking that step this year. It just not immediately amazing returns. I guess to go back to Natchez, there's a player who I'm willing to take a shot on just to see if he can sort of regain the hype that we had for him 2 years ago. If you have a few empty roster spots or a few streamers, I think that's a pretty reasonable hold for now and see how he plays over the next 5 games or so. Lewis, why don't you take us to our next player?
All right, our next and final guy we're going to talk about is an old favorite of mine, and that is Joshy Anderson, 6% owned on Yahoo. Right now, he is riding as the third wheel with Caulfield and Suzuki, which really is the only line you really want to roster on the Habs, especially when, down the line, they're probably not going to be unleashing this is our Super Bowl level effort against their Toronto nemesis. It really reminds me of Michigan State rivalry when oftentimes MSU has nothing to play for, but they play Michigan like it's a frickin' knife fight in an alley. It just makes my eyes itch sometimes. But yeah, Josh Anderson scored on his only shot. He put up 2 hits. He played a touch over 50% of the power play minutes. So he seems like a guy that you can grab if you're looking for someone on Montreal with exposure to these budding stars. Again, we're only 1 game in, so things could certainly change, but they got to be happy happy with the outcome against Toronto. So I imagine they'll run the same lines at least for the next game or two. The only one red flag, though, is that every Habs line was underwater in terms of shots on goal percentage. Only the Dadonov line managed to break even. So last night's success may have been a bit of a mirage, even beyond just sort of Montreal punching above their weight in the opening game and against a rival. But, you know, if there's anybody that I'm looking to pick up as a free agent from Montreal, Josh Anderson is the guy. He can put together the peripherals. He's known to shoot, even though he only had one shot in that last game. And, you know, you're not going to be able to pull a Caulfield or a Suzuki, but you can pull their third wheel for the time being.
What about Shawnee Monty's debut as a Hab? Put up a goal, playing on power play one as well. Has a better history of production. Does Monahan interest you at all?
I mean, yeah, I think a little bit. I don't love his even strength deployment though. Like I like that he's on the power play. And there was definitely somebody on Twitter, I wish I could remember who it was, but they were just like, you know, Monahan's going to score in this opener, right? Like definitely is going to happen. So they really nailed it. I don't know. I think I would rather have the guy with Caulfield and Suzuki. I feel like Anderson can score, similarly to Monahan with their deployment being, you know, what it is.
Yeah. I mean, I don't mind, Hoffman, Monahan, Doc could be pretty decent. And that's the only line that outshot out-Corsied the Leafs, I guess.
There you go.
The term I'll use. Kind of funny to see that top line on for all five even strength goals last night. 3 goals for, 2 goals against. I will say, like, in terms of looking at shot metrics, in a 1-game sample on the first night of the season, I'm not going to overreact to any of that. You know, it's way too soon to be worried about whether or not the top line outshot the heavy favorite. You know, I think that he'll stay there regardless, unless the team sucks, and that is definitely a possibility. That just
let's not write that off possibility for sure.
I will say though, one name I got to throw it out there after he played 91% of the power play time last night. Chris Weidman, power play superstar. Literally 33% of his minutes last night in the season opener were on the man advantage. He did nothing on the score sheet. 1 shot, 2 blocks. Okay, that's not fair. And put up 2 PIMs if you're in a multi-cat. But if your league is very heavy on power play points or points in general, he wasn't the worst player, the worst fantasy hold in the world towards the end of last season. 10 points in the last 15 games, 17 in the last 36. I don't know. I have to mention him because the opportunity is there.
When you have a power play quarterback out there on the waiver wire, you've got to mention him because there's plenty of people rostering defensemen who don't have that same kind of power play opportunity. So, you know, it can definitely be a worthwhile, it could be worth taking a look at.
Wait, one more note here. As Shams is noting in the chat, Mike Matheson expected to miss 8 weeks with an abdominal muscle strain following the results of an MRI as well. So yeah, Chris Weidman about to just be playing all situations. Chris Weidman, you heard it here first. Superstar stud.
Well, yeah, so I was going to bring up Matheson too. And yeah, so I think that's a really good point. I'm glad Shams mentioned him. And yeah, certainly he's going to be without kind of the specter of Matheson hanging over his shoulder. And it is really going to give him a chance to solidify the job if he can be effective.
All right, Lewis, that's all the time we have for tonight. We are venturing deep into long shift territory.
Man, coach is gonna have us, you know, doing sprints afterwards.
Elon's going to send us on bag skates after this. So we got to go. We got to get ready for the rink. But I want to thank everyone for listening. I want to thank you for joining me, my friend. And I'm looking forward to congrats on finishing the first week. I'm looking forward to hanging out with you again next week.
All season long, bud. Thanks everybody for joining us. Those of you who are listening on the pod or who joined us for the Twitch. Please make sure to give us a follow at Short Shifts KK. Brian and Elon, of course, are at Keeping Carlson. Dave Betton of the Stream Scheme at NHL Stream Scheme. And you can follow the suite of game day accounts, game day lines, game day goalies, and at Game Day News, all put together on the Game Day Tweets website. John Reed on the ones and twos for us, helping us make our Twitch look awesome. And visit the great sites where we research our episodes at Yahoo, Frozen Tools, Natural Stat Trick, and Cupful.com. Our intro and outro music was created by Pat Roach. And until we see you next time, play smart and keep your shifts short, unlike us.